Hey guys, welcome back to Panic to Peace. In today's video, we are going to be dealing with all things trauma. So we're going to jump straight into it. The first thing that we are going to do is kind of go ahead and define trauma, right? Just so we can make sure we're talking about the same thing today. But when I say trauma, what we are talking about is going to be anything that either disrupts our worldview, right? The way that we see the world, the way we kind of think about the world working, or two, our role within that worldview. So traumatic events can vary and look all different kinds of shapes, sizes, events, whatever it may be. And as we go through this, I'm sure, if you've fallen into the anxiety cycle, the panic cycle, whatever it may be, you probably have what you consider some traumatic event that has either directly caused this or at least contributed to it. So as we talk about this today, try to keep, that event in mind and see how much of this applies to that. And then hopefully, we're going to discuss some ways that you can kind of move past that traumatic event and start to either rebound or hopefully grow from it. Okay, so when we said that trauma is this thing that disrupts your worldview and your role in it, right? We noticed that there are kind of three different routes that you can go when something traumatic happens. So for some people, they just tend to get stuck in that place. They can't move past it. Basically, it's disrupted their worldview so much that they just cannot rationalize it in any way, right? Why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? What else is going to happen, right? And it just causes these thoughts and ruminations and whatever else, and you get stuck in this rabbit hole. So that's one route you can go. Two, we tend to see that some people do kind of rebound, right? They learn how to eventually factor in this traumatic event into their worldview, into their role within that world. And they get back to kind of their pre-traumatic experience way of living. And I know for most of us, that's our goal, right? We just want to get back to normalcy. And then there's kind of this third group of people where we actually see them thrive and grow from this traumatic event, right? It doesn't usually happen immediately, but basically, where tier one, you get stuck and you just stay at this low functioning level. Tier two is kind of the resiliency that we just talked about, where you bounce back to your normal levels. And then so tier three is going to be kind of these people that show this post-traumatic growth. They take their pre-trauma baseline and they actually learn how to function above that. So if you're one of those people that's kind of stuck in that moment and you just can't seem to get back to normal, just keep this in mind, that there is a level beyond just bouncing back to your pre-trauma levels. It's totally fine to kind of just shoot back to normal for now, but just know that you can take this traumatic experience. Emily talked about that in, I think, her last video, but we'll link that down below, but there is definitely reasons for all of this happening where you can grow from it. So when we say growth, there's kind of these different aspects of what that can look like, right? Maybe you handle adversity better. Maybe you've developed new, relationships that you didn't have before. Maybe you found new skills that you didn't know you had, or you developed them and you didn't have them pre-trauma. We do see with most people that you tend to appreciate life on a different level, pre and post trauma. Whereas before that event, there may have been, health, life, whatever it may be, you might have taken some of those things for granted, just assuming that they'll be there forever. And, post trauma, you've found a new appreciation for some of those things. And then the last one that we're really going to dive into today, as far as that growth and flourishing goes, is so studies actually show that these traumatic experiences, whether you would consider yourself religious or non-religious prior to this event, most traumatic experiences do get people to reevaluate, or maybe it's just even evaluate for the first time, their faith in their eternity. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. I know Emily kind of touched on it with that last video where, she's talking about, why has God not healed me yet? And we talk about, sometimes he's just trying to get your attention, whatever that may be. So we're going to dive into that aspect. And one more thing to note, reading off my notes here. So people who tend to grow from trauma, some qualities that they've observed through all these different studies is they tend to have better health, mental health, as well as physical health. They're less prone to addictive behaviors. They handle future stressors better. They feel more purpose in their lives. And then ultimately they end up living longer lives, overall. So again, like I said, if you're just shooting for, getting out of that stuck place where it might have been months, it could even be years where you've just been dealing with this traumatic experience and you cannot move past it, What we really want to help you do is move past it and not just reach, that event level, but just move past it into this resilience and growth and be one of those examples and reap all the benefits of that. So let's talk about the kind of spiritual component of these traumatic experiences a little bit. So as far as the spiritual component goes of trauma and dealing with it and growing from it, one of the first things that we're going to talk about is just what Emily touched on in that previous video. Why has God not healed me yet? That's the video if you want to look it up. We'll link it down below. But sometimes God just needs to get our attention, right? Whether it's the people that may have never considered having a relationship with him before. Maybe it's the people who have kind of drifted in their faith. Maybe it's somebody who's strong in their faith, but there's just something that they're missing within that faith. God can definitely use these traumatic experiences to kind of get our attention. The studies show, like we said earlier, that most people who go through a traumatic experience tend to evaluate their faith in their eternity for either the first time or kind of go back in and reevaluate it. And the reason for that is most of the time these traumatic experiences tend to bring our own mortality kind of into the equation, right? I know, personally speaking, I plan on living a happy, healthy, long life. But, if something were to happen where a medical diagnosis, somebody in my family passes away unexpectedly, right? Those type of things can make me start to consider on my own life, like what's going to happen. And so for a lot of people, we do see that where their mortality kind of becomes more aware to them, and they go and, all of us are designed to pursue God. But, a lot of the times we get lost in kind of the hustle and bustle of daily life, and we lose sight of that. And so kind of these traumatic experiences, I think God is using them as a way of just recapturing our attention and getting us to realize this need and desire to seek him. So, even for us, for myself, like that's kind of what happened to us. We were just in a rough place. I was in a rough place, and we realized that if we were going to thrive, then we needed to pursue a relationship with God. So I know firsthand that he can use these experiences for that. The next one is basically that God, just like any parent, or hopefully what most parents would agree with, is that God cares more for your character than your comfort, right? And so another way of thinking about this is, when we are comfortable, when things are good, when life is good, when we have all the money in the world and all the things that we could ever want, and life is just good, we're not really in a hurry to kind of push ourselves a lot of the time. And why would we, right? We're successful, we're happy, things are going our way. Most of us don't look in that season of life as, well, how can I improve? What can I do better? What can I do differently? And if we are thinking about those things, it tends to be from kind of a worldly perspective, right? How can I keep improving at my job? How can I keep making more money? How can I, on and on and on. Rarely in those stages of comfort are we saying like, what, how do I need to pursue God differently? How do I need to pursue God better? So what God can do, and this is what I've seen with Emily, is this season of anxiety that she went through where it was crippling, but I watched her develop new skills. I watched her, reassess some of the things that she was going through at that time, where she developed a stronger character. She developed new habits. She did all these things that she did not have prior to falling into the anxiety cycle. And so, yes, like there were times at the beginning, especially where she's like, this just sucks. I want to get back to my normal life. Right. But what we ended up seeing in retrospect was that God had taken, this comfort that we were living in at the time, and he had kind of disrupted it in a way where it was like, I need you guys to change, right? We're all called to be disciple makers. Were we doing that at the time? Kind of, sort of, right? We were getting plugged into church and doing all that and reading our Bible and all the like basics. But there was definitely more, I think, that he was wanting us to do. And we just weren't in a place at that time to, one, be able to do it. And two, we just didn't even see that desire to do it. So as God kind of pushed us and put all the health stuff on her plate, we definitely realized, one, a calling for it, and then two, we also saw the growth kind of come from that. So, being in this season of discomfort isn't a bad thing, right? Don't always look at it that way. It could just be God trying to move you into action. One Bible verse that I want to point out is Romans 5, verses 3 and 4. But it says in that, and this is kind of my paraphrase, but it says that basically our suffering produces perseverance, and then our perseverance will produce character, and then our character will in turn bring about that hope. So just think about that, right? Right now, you may be suffering. You might have been stuck in this health and anxiety stuff for a really long time now, but it is producing that perseverance and that character. And that's ultimately what Ideal is intended to do, is teach you how to persevere through those really tough days, those really tough moments, where you're just feeling so symptomatic, so anxious, so panicky, so whatever it may be, and learning how to continue to live life even in those moments. Okay, the next one that I want to point out is that sometimes it's just not on our plate to understand why certain things happen, right? We can go on and on for days about, something that happens that just, we cannot wrap our mind around it. And like we said at the beginning of this, some people just get stuck in that. For the rest of us, for the people that are able to kind of get out of that stuck moment feeling, most of the time it's just understanding that we may not understand everything that God has put in our life, right? Think about the book of Job. He's questioning, why are all these terrible things happening to him? And eventually God shows up and shows Job that, his limited understanding as a human is nothing compared to God's understanding of and literally everything. I mean, if you think about the entire universe, he created all of it. He designed it to work in this perfectly harmonious way. And as humans, we can't comprehend that. We can't understand that. But I guarantee you, when we've kind of closed our eyes for the last time and, we get to see a replay of our life, or whatever you think that's going to look like, is we will see these moments that did not make sense to us in these lifetimes. And we will see the goodness that God has brought about both through that moment, from that moment, that would not have been otherwise. And, in this lifetime, in this world, it's easy to look at those things and just say well, that was a terrible way of doing it, right? From our limited human perspective. I would never wish sickness, disease, death on anyone, but God ultimately is kind of higher than my logic and higher than my reasoning. And he knows that sometimes that is his good plan. We don't have to understand it, but we just need to trust him in those moments. So finding that balance can be a little bit tricky, right? As humans, we want to understand, we want to know, right? Some people focus on that way too much, being able to explain every single thing. And for some people, that's why science has kind of become their idol. They need to explain everything. And ultimately at the end of the day, we have to step back and just say God, your ways are better than our own. They're higher than our own. We couldn't comprehend it, even if you showed up and tried to let us understand. We're just not capable of that. We are not God. Only God can kind of understand and put all those pieces together in a way that is good. If I think about it this way, and this is kind of what God shows Job when he shows up, is if we as humans tried to keep the entire universe working in the way that it does, it would fall apart so fast. And so, it's just, we ultimately have to get to that level. We do not have to understand what God is doing, but we do need to trust that whatever he's doing, and this is what the Bible says, whatever he is doing is going to be for the good of us. So just finding that, it's a little bit of reassurance, but finding his goodness, trusting in his goodness, his character, that can be ways to kind of move past that traumatic moment. So the last kind of piece of the spiritual puzzle that I'm going to talk about on this one is just understanding that God understands what we're going through, right? If we think about the life of Jesus and all the things that he had to suffer on our behalf, totally unjustified, totally, more terrible than anything that we'll ever go through in this lifetime, right? It literally ended with him dying on a cross for our sins. But the good news there is that, Jesus overcame all of that. And we will too, right? As we place our trust in him, our faith in him, we are promised that same resurrection that he's already demonstrated to us. will be the same resurrection that we get to share in one day. So just as Jesus kind of suffered in the way, that some of us are suffering right now, there are some points that the Bible kind of teaches us. So, the Bible teaches us to gain wisdom, right? Gain that earthly wisdom. They have books like Proverbs, books like Job, that can help us kind of understand the way that God's world tends to work, right? Sometimes just gaining that understanding can help us move past those traumatic experiences. The Bible teaches us to change the way that we think, right? Romans 12:2, we mention that a lot on these videos. But just transforming your mind, don't letting the world be the thing that controls the way you think. Don't let society determine your thought patterns and what's good and what's bad. Like that will always be kind of a moving scale. But like we said, if we trust in God's word, like it will be that way forever. It's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It will not change. So we can find some comfort there. It says to have fellowship, right? It says to pray with each other, for each other, and it also says to pray with God. One of the things here, one of the verses is James 5:16. It says, pray for each other so that you may be healed, right? If you are just keeping this traumatic experience to yourself, I'd highly, highly, highly encourage you to find somebody that you trust, that you can talk about these things with. It's not a way of coping, right? We don't want you to just use that person as like a sounding board to listen about whatever's happened, but find those people where you can pray together, where you can heal together, where you can, really process those traumatic events. And maybe it does take being in a community with somebody to help them kind of reshape that worldview, right? Going all the way back to the trauma that we defined at the beginning of this. Like, sometimes you need other people to help you make sense of the traumatic experience, make it fit into that worldview, rearrange your worldview in a way that is consistent with what the Bible teaches, where that traumatic event may just be a small piece within that puzzle. So find community. And then the last one is just share that comfort with others. So this is something I know that was an inspiration for Emily when she was kind of going through the anxiety recovery process back in the day. But this verse is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3-7. But essentially paraphrasing here, but it says that, as you heal, as you grow from these things, that can be and will be a comfort to other people. So, if you're kind of stuck in the season right now where you don't see yourself ever getting out of this, you will. Okay, you will. We've got to make kind of sense of that traumatic experience, follow ideal, avoid the 5 F's, right? All those things that Emily preaches in her videos. But you will be that comfort to somebody else eventually, right? Right now, you look and you say, man, I will never get there, but you will. And other people will ask you how you did it. Other people will ask you for advice. And you will be equipped in a way to answer that and help other people heal. So it's not just through your lifestyle, but also use your words, right? I encourage anybody who's either healed from this anxiety cycle or one day will heal, use that, right? Let that be part of your testimony. Find other people that are hurting in a similar way, and then just really be, that help that you need in this season. Eventually other people will need that same help, and so you can be that help to them. So guys, I hope this was helpful. I know traumatic experiences obviously are terrible by nature, but you guys can all be in that third tier of people that really grow from this. Let this be something that spurs you into action. Let this be something that keeps you going if you're already kind of in that healing process and that healing journey. God is with you. He sees everything you're going through. This has been a season of life for whatever reason. Maybe one day you'll understand it. Maybe one day you won't. But, at the end of it, we just trust in God's goodness. So let this be an encouragement. Guys, you got this. We will talk to you later.